since we have I don't know what our investment is in SAP, a $6 billion company, it's huge. I need to use the same tool my people use. Because if I get into a different tool, I can't institutionalize it, right? It's about speaking the language I already know. I don't want my people to learn a different language. I don't want my organization to learn a different language. I want to be able to speak that current language they use and interface with those tools they already know. So I think I walk in detail about some of these. And I say, what do we do with our inaccurate forecast? Do we throw it out in the trash heap? No, we reduce our dependency on an accurate forecast. So this is where I go into a little more detail about it. So supply chain conditioning, we run a sales and operations planning process that sets the overall demand trend at a product group level. So we have global product managers. They understand what's going on in the market. They talk to the regional people around the world. They try to understand what's going on in the market. One of our products is flame retardants. Any electronic you have has to make sure that if it gets too hot, it's not going to burst into flames. Like inside an iPhone, our company makes a material that applies to the inside of the iPhone, right? In building structures, after 9/11, this was big. You saw a big building collapse. Now you'll go into buildings and you'll see exposed pipework. It looks like it's painted. Matter of fact, down here in the breezeway, you'll see a bunch of structural pipes coming in. It's got a coating that we make, a flame retardant that's super thin. When exposed to heat, it literally swells up like a foot thick, and it provides an insulated barrier so the structure can maintain integrity. And while people get out of the building, it's got to last like 3 or 4 hours structural integrity. So when something like 9/11 happens and people start thinking about, well, how can we have structures stand up? We have global product managers that then see a huge increase in demand, and this gathering data at a local level becomes very important, but we're not making actionable level at a detailed SKU basis at that point. So we identify what products we have, what resources they go through, and say, are we loaded? Are we fully loaded? Are we over capacity? Do we need to go to third-party vendors? Do we need to use third-party tolling manufacturers for peak seasons? Can we go through most of the year using our own facilities and bring someone on for 2-3 months of the year? And if they say no, then we can level it all year long and monitor our demand. So that's what we're doing in a strategic setting. And then execution, we want product consumption to trigger replenishment. So very much like a grocery store, right? Every time I go into my local grocery store, almost to a fault, they're stocked with product. And they're stocked, their shelves aren't overflowing. They have 10 tubes of toothpaste. They have 20 bottles of shampoo. I'm a huge shampoo consumer. Don't know why I picked that example. I got a little girl, I think of shampoo. So it's, or all the beautiful hair my audience has. So they're not thinking about how many cars we have in the parking lot. Oh my gosh, a school bus came off and start placing the orders, and the bus drives away. That's what my company was doing. Oh my gosh, look at our order books. There's so much demand, and SAP was looking at those orders on the order books, consuming our forecast when we had a monthly forecast, and it was getting all excited and placing purchase orders. Oh my gosh, here we go. Sales are going to hit. And the demand shifted. They took their order off, they put it on with another customer, another supplier in the industry. Maybe they were hedging to get limited product. Their demand changed, they canceled their orders, they pushed the orders out. So we said looking at our actual customer orders isn't even a good model for us because we're overreacting. So we said we're just going to move inventory when inventory moves. Simple, right? So if we have a warehouse, I'm not going to replenish material in that warehouse until I get down to a certain level. Because when I get down to a certain level, I know material has been good issued out of the warehouse, and now I need to replenish. People call it visual planning systems, Kanban, reorder points. There's many terms for basically the same thing, a two-bin system, whatever you want to call it. Because if I look at the last year of demand, and I say a forecast system, what's it going to do? You're going to take all your past demand, you're going to load it in and predict what you're going to do in the future, right? So when I look at setting triggers in my supply chain for what these minimums and these thresholds are going to be, when I replenish, what do? I look at a year's worth of demand, and I say that's the best predictor of what's going to happen in the future. So I say, what's my average demand over a week, right? I think I have another slide that explains this. I'll skip over it if it doesn't flow right. I look at my average demand over a week, and I say, what's my replenishment cycle time? If my replenishment cycle time is 6 weeks for this product, and I sell a ton of product a week, I need 6 tons. But then I have to talk about service levels and how variable that demand is, because it may not all be smooth. So the higher my demand deviation is on the product, the more, call it, safety stock you need. So we build a stocking profile at an SKU level that we say, here's our inventory floor. When we hit the floor, the message generates through a planner. They replenish our inventory. And by the time that inventory arrives, we should be hitting that floor again, but yet we have that variability built in. So we are hitting our fill rates at about a 97, 96% fill rate, and we're not forecasting, right? We're not forecasting per se, at the macro level, but we're not in a room trying to bang it out on a daily basis. And I'm going to show you the results. It's really been really fantastic, the results we've achieved with this. So we're conditioning the supply chain with the forecast. And this is kind of the busy eye chart, which just shows you basically the top is your supply chain, right? And you see customer, manufacturing, your raw material suppliers to the left. It talks about our distribution centers, manufacturing requirements, and I'll sum this up. We decouple production from what's happening. So when we model how much inventory should be set at a finished goods level in a manufacturing plant, we look at how much inventory flowed out of that location over a year, and we go through that statistical analysis. And then we look at a major export warehouse, and we look at that export warehouse and do the same thing. How much demand flowed out of that export warehouse over a yearly basis? And we look at our import warehouse here in the U.S., or in China, or in Brazil. How much demand flowed out of that import warehouse? And we set these reorder points across the supply chain, right? Because they should be able to operate independently. I don't have to trigger when something happens in the marketplace that someone's producing inventory. If my reorder points or Kanbans are set correctly, bins are going to start to empty and fill all the way up the supply chain, all the way back through my raw material supplies. Or I even have Kanbans and reorder points set with my raw material suppliers. So as I'm going through a manufacturing run, I'm not scrambling to buy raw materials. I'm putting in a reorder point, and it makes master planners nervous. They're like, well, how much raw materials do I have in order? When's it getting here? Don't worry about it. Just make production. As long as you're doing what we've done in the last year, we've covered it with statistics. It took found a fundamental amount of trust in the organization to trust that these numbers worked, and they did, thank the Lord. I wouldn't be here. So we look at the third step, is apply demand pull planning techniques to replenish inventory. So we look at those two arrows I had, plan everything, plan nothing. This is the important slide, right? This says you really have to understand what your demand is. You have to understand a segmentation analysis, a volume variability analysis. People call it many different things. Most of you, if you're in supply chain, have seen some type of slide like this, where you see your average demand on the bottom from low to high, and then you see your normalized deviation of demand. So you have demand that is really erratic, that you don't sell a lot of. I'm going to contend, why would I forecast that? I'm going to make it once a year. I'm going to throw it in inventory, right? I'm not going to worry about trying to plan it all the time. I have demand pull techniques that I get into. I have rate base when my demand is strong. Variability is low. I can level load a plant and rate base it. But to go through this process on an annual basis or a quarterly basis or a 6-month basis with the company and truly understand how many supply chain planners can look at their products and say, these 30 are rate based, these 25 are demand pull techniques, and here's why, right? That's what we need to do, because I have limited FTEs in my organization, and I want people working on the exceptions. I only want people working on things they need the intelligence for. If I can set it and forget it, I'm going to set it and forget it. So we go through a volume variability analysis, and in the core you have your demand pull techniques, right? So the demand pull techniques, we look at those products, and we say we're going to replenish these based off the market demand. And we go through looking at that yearly demand history every quarter. So every quarter we take it to a trailing 12 months, and we look at the statistics on it. So once a quarter, and right now we're in the middle of it, going through a refresh, pulling the data, putting it through an Access database, coming out with the answers, and loading a master data load into SAP. Hitting the switch and seeing what inventory you can bring in. Some products will burn off, and that's how we adjust for seasonality without trying to overthink seasonality, right? Because if we're always catching a year and we're shifting it every 4 months, unless they're really big seasonal swings, I don't have to even worry about planning for seasonality that much. Does this make sense?
Yes.
2 people are getting it. I'm happy, very happy. No, I appreciate it.
Do you do any sort of analysis by your top 5 customers and look at their run rates or their consumption rates, or do you do any channel analysis, and then does that help you calculate your Kanban work points and at a summary level and say, here's where we set go?
I think that we have some tweaks we make in the system for certain customers to make sure if there is I mean, the answer is yes and no. I would say no, we don't do that as you're explaining it, but what we do is understand we have to have some type of a service differential, especially when we have products where demand exceeds supply. So we do have some settings that we can set to make sure that our priority customers are getting more of the fair share than others. But when it comes to actually setting the Kanban level, we really as an organization, we look across North America and say we want a 98% service level, period. And that's what we set across industry, across customer base, regardless of how much that customer adds up of that total product mix or any given product. We want a 98% customer service level, because this is a pigment that goes in this Nestle bottle that makes the glue on this. They can't run without it, right? So we have to have inventory available. It's not something that's easy. You can't easily switch, because people in the laboratory spec these products in, they spend a lot of time on them. So we really upset our customers when we stock out, because we hold up production. We were weeks and some we couldn't help all the brown beer bottles in North America are manufactured with one dye that we're bringing to the country, and we were air freighting in dyes so brown beer bottle manufacturing can continue. So we try to set our service levels in a smart way, and you could have a discussion on commodity versus specialty chemicals and how you set service levels differently. You could even make the argument in commodities you want to be higher if you have a cost position, because the switching behavior is so easy. Specialty chemicals, you want a lower fill rate, which is kind of counterintuitive, but hopefully that helps. And I think I talked a little bit about how we do our rear point, how we manage this together. And this is just what it looks like graphically. And when you look at your the first part of that rear point, this is just an example. 1,500 kgs. This is that average demand over lead time. So that's what we need to stock over our lead time. But you look at that, we're almost putting 2/3 of that same amount on top of it, just because that one product is variable. So what you'll see is that blue bar getting smaller and smaller as demand variation is smoother, and as demand varies more wildly, that top is getting bigger and bigger. And then when my executive team comes to me and says, Matt, how come your inventory where it is? I say, because that's the nature of the buying patterns of our customers. Now we can talk about demand shaping. If we would like to shape demand, if we would like to smoothen demand, if we want to take some actions with our customers, then we can start bringing down our inventory. But given the fill rates we want, given the order buying behavior of our customers, and the lead times we have, these are the inventory levels and the absolute minimum we're going to have to maintain. And as we replenish, this is the maximum we're going to have to maintain. So I'm no longer trying to explain myself on a monthly basis why my inventories are too high, because it is what it is. It's a product of good statistical thinking. And then finally, we operationalize this into our core SAP system. So we went through numerous screens and we said, if this is how it happens, and I want SAP, a screen where a planner goes in, he loads all his products, he or she, and on a daily basis they can look and they see traffic lights. So on the bottom of the screen they see their product, their planning, and they see green, yellow, red. If it's green, they're good. If it's red, they need to go into production immediately. If it's yellow and how many Kanbans are empty, they understand the priority of going into production. So there's some assumption here of some flexible manufacturing, right? In a process industry where you've got a dedicated plant that's running 24/7, it's not going to be that applicable. So you're going to need more, not a discrete environment, but you're going to have a plant that is somewhat flexible. Above 80% of a capacity load, this isn't going to work, because you need time for some changeovers.